Hello everyone, welcome to this week's episode. Ahead of a busy week in Monaco, I've managed to pin down Naomi Schiff, Ted Kravitz and Simon Lazenby. Welcome along everyone.
Hello, Matthew.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for coming, and happy birthday actually, Naomi, for last week.
Belated now, but thank
Belated.
you. Thank you.
A week late.
A year older now.
Simon and I feel like we're in the presence of a reunion here.
Yes.
The on-screen
My old mucker.
yeah.
That's what
It
he
is.
says,
They've
isn't
actually
it?
deactivated my pass. That's how long I haven't been here. So
Well,
it's good to be invited back.
I know. It's all been. It's good to be back in the studio. I feel like I should be addressing this presenter, Matthew.
Yeah, it's going to be confusing.
I'm a guest, mate. You've got to get used to
You're
it.
a guest.
You've got to get used to it.
But you know this studio well,
I
Simon.
do. This is where we did the rugby club for 10 years.
Wow.
Back in the day.
Back in the day.
But
In the good
now,
old days.
it's used for podcasts.
And now it's used for podcasts.
So there we are.
But a very interesting podcast
Yes.
about a race that didn't happen.
Yes,
Yeah.
let's tell you what the plan is then. So I want to talk a little bit about the events in Imola of last week and what it means for the sport going forward before getting into a story that broke on Monday of this week in the Mail that Ferrari are set to offer Lewis Hamilton a £40 million a year contract to lure him away from Mercedes. And I think that officially opens the keys to silly season.
What? Does it?
Or opens the door
okay,
to silly
yeah.
season, yeah. I think
Starts the topic.
We're officially in. But let's talk about Imola. And of course, we should be sat here talking about, the Grand Prix that happened this weekend. We're not, and that's because the race was cancelled due to the devastating flooding in the Emilia-Romagna region of Italy. Simon, I think the right decision. I don't think anyone would argue it was the right decision to cancel the Grand Prix.
Yeah, funnily enough, I was reading an article. An old friend of mine writes for The Guardian now. She's the Italy correspondent, and she was out there, and she was, I spoke to her about what it was like out there, or what it's still like out there. Obviously, it's the right decision. I don't think there's really much to say about this, in that 36,000 people homeless, 14 lives lost. Just huge devastation across the region. I think in 36 hours, it was 6 months rainfall fell, wasn't it? So there was only one option for Formula One. And yes, okay, people will have lost money. Are they going to look for another weekend where they could fit it? There's talk potentially the first week of the summer break. I don't think it's going to happen. I think, it's a tragedy for everybody involved, and there was only one thing for Formula One to do, and they took the right decision.
I think the only reason to have it on again would be to bring the money that was going to go into the Emilia-Romagna region in hotels, restaurants, services, all of that back. But yeah, when you're faced with a looking at not only the devastation, but the practicalities of it. The Grand Prix demands a lot from a region. It demands police, it demands doctors, ambulance staff, medical people. I stand in the pit lane most of the time next to a doctor or a few doctors who are ready if there's an accident or someone gets run over by a car or a tyre comes loose. They were busy doing other stuff, understandably. It just wasn't possible to have it. So, people talk about, did Formula One learn from the mistakes of Melbourne 2020 with the pandemic and not knowing whether to cancel it before Friday practice, and all of that, not foreseeable. Spa 2020 or 2021?
21, wasn't it?
21, was it? The rain came, all right, not foreseeable. It wasn't like that. This was foreseeable, actual, and totally the right decision.
I agree with you guys that I don't think it could have gone forward, even if the rains would have settled. It's just when there is, as you said, so much devastation going on, it's not a good look to put on an event that's, mostly there for entertainment. So I think they made the right decision.
And and good that Formula One's donating $1 million, aren't they? To
And Ferrari.
And Ferrari
doing that.
Yeah, we saw Yuki Tsunoda, didn't we, helping out in Faenza, where AlphaTauri are based.
Yeah.
It was on the streets helping out. Ted, would you say this is kind of the first time in Formula One's history that we've had to cancel a race due to the climate crisis?
Yeah, I think it is, actually, now you mention it. Climate change is a thing, and Simon talks about the rainfall, 6 months rainfall happened in the space of a few days. He's right, because there had been a drought in Emilia-Romagna up until that point. January, February, March, April, there was no rain. And there was no snow on the mountains, I think, as well. And reading about it before I came here, that's where a lot of the irrigation and the natural way that the soil works and the climate works, they rely on a lot of the snowfall to then come through and make the ground, ready for rain. And the ground wasn't ready for all of the rain that they had. It just went straight, wasn't absorbed by any of the soil. went straight into the rivers, the Santerno River, and then what with the Santerno River being right next to the circuit. And even though the track itself was only sort of lightly flooded, I mean, we saw the devastation of people's houses, that's the other thing we should possibly talk about. A lot of the infrastructure wasn't in place. TV compound was flooded. A lot of our stuff was flooded. It's having to be dried out and hosed out. A lot of the infrastructure just wasn't possible. So, with the climate crisis, which we'll talk about, Formula One's part of the solution in a minute, that was the first case.
Well, it came close in Miami, didn't we? I mean, in April, they had the same thing, and the paddock was flooded then, so it could have happened to Miami if we'd started a month and a bit earlier, because they had the same. They had an enormous amount of rainfall in a short space of time, and they couldn't cope with it. We know it's how close it is to sea level, having stayed on the coast there. I mean, it's right on it, and Miami. Obviously, you saw Sebastian Vettel's T-shirt, didn't we, in his last year there, which was warning against that. And lo and behold, a year later they have an issue with it, and then we go on to Emilia-Romagna, and I mean, obviously we're going to get more extreme situations, whether it's droughts and floods and all that. Just studying all my son at the moment for his exams, and it reinforces it all. That it's just happening everywhere.
What about then Formula One being part of the solution to help this? And I guess, they've set their own targets, haven't they, to be net zero by 2030. They're also aiming to have a 50% reduction in its own carbon emissions by 2030. So how are Formula One doing that?
I like this subject because, I bang on for a long time about how efficient these power units are, and that you've got a lot of internal combustion engines all around the world only really delivering 30% of the fuel, of the
efficiency.
They're not particularly efficient. 70% of that goes out in heat and exhaust and all of that. Formula One power units are 50% efficient. So we're already doing something like that. Great gains in that area. And then in 3 years' time, actually in 2.5 years' time, when the 2026 season starts, so we're now 2023, 2024 season, 2025 season, and then testing for the 2026 season, all of the cars will be running on carbon neutral, sustainable fuels.
It's soon.
It's really 2.5 seasons. And you could say, okay, well, that's only the cars going around. They don't use much fuel. Well, all of the other stuff as well is moving very, very quickly to sustainable fuels, which will contribute to Formula One's net carbon zero targets for 2030. Sky also has net carbon zero for 2030 as well, by 2030. So that means the end of the 2029 season. So you've got Mercedes announced today that all of their trucks, all of their haulage, all of their freight will be powered by sustainable fuels, meaning in hundreds of tons of CO2 not emitted and contributing to climate change, and 60% reduction in carbon, probably a bit higher actually, but they're aiming for a solid 60% reduction in CO2.
Yeah, I did a campaign about 2030, and actually that's the target for everybody, not just Formula One, not just the teams. There are actual goals set by the UN that we need to achieve by 2030 for this planet to still exist by 2050. And you can see all these things happening in climate change. We're talking about fires, we're talking about floods, we're talking about droughts. It's happening, and we are in a position where we don't have a choice anymore to ignore these types of things. And I think one thing that's also a big issue for teams and for Formula One is that big corporates and sponsors are very conscious of where these teams are like how they, exactly like you said, the team kit, the way they travel, all these things are being monitored because everybody has this responsibility now to do more, to be more involved in making better decisions for their teams and for their companies. So it does seem like a big issue to solve, but every little thing we do will make the difference.
And Formula One is a global sport, right? It is probably the sport that's going to feel it ahead of some of the other sports. Certainly, like football in the UK is not going to feel it in the way that travelling around the globe and going around.
You mean this will happen again? Imola, what happened in Imola will happen again to Formula One.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about the way that you've got these such clever people who work in Formula One, who, when you think about it, all right, powering cars to go round and round in circles, it's relatively unimportant. Sorry, I know it's already, but it is relatively unimportant, motor racing as an activity that furthers, human
existence.
But getting those people, we are going to 7 minutes in. But if you're getting those the brain boxes, the boffins,
Solution focused.
into solving some of those solutions in sustainable fuels and helping to be part of the solution rather than part of the problem, then isn't that great?
From a sporting perspective, Naomi, obviously we've lost a race. We're now down to 22 races for the season. Who will that have benefited? I mean, do we think Red Bull possibly have lost an opportunity there to get more points on the board? Would it have been looking like a 1-2 for Red Bull in Imola?
There was a couple of teams coming with quite big upgrades, which have now been delayed by another race, which, you know, everything they would have learned this weekend, they would have been able to carry through to Monaco and also to potentially adapt what other packages they have coming for Barcelona. So I think there's a lot of teams actually that have suffered from it not happening rather than teams who would have gained from it not happening. Red Bull clearly are in a period right now, I don't need to mention this, we all know it's clearly the case, where they're very much dominating. So I think any race where they can avoid potentially their competitors advancing their developments, then they would benefit. I can't really think of who else would have benefited from it not happening potentially.
Ted, what are the knock-on impacts then of those upgrades coming to Monaco, particularly for Mercedes? I'm thinking.
Yeah.
No, you're right. Naomi's right. I think had everything been the same, and Imola was looking like a circuit built for the Red Bull RB19, and they would have been looking for a 1-2, and they would maybe be sad that they won't go away with the 43 points. How many points do you get for 1-2?
25, 18 and 1.
25, 18 and 1, yeah.
Is it 43?
44.
44, thank you very much. I mean, they argue Red Bull lost, didn't they? Not that they care, but they lost from not having Imola. Because they're going to Monaco and they're faced with the Alonso potential, the Alonso threat, should we call it that? Who is he is well motivated. And yes, Aston Martin are going to need everything to go perfectly for them in Monaco in order to beat Red Bull, because that RB19 will still be a good car in Monaco. It's not, like it's completely different. It's very different, but it's not completely different. And then you've got the Mercedes upgrades, which they are bringing to Monaco. And that puts it to me again that, everyone says, oh, you'd be crazy to bring your upgrades to Monaco. Boom, banger, bang, bang, isn't it?
But they will.
Bash, crash,
They
all
will.
of that. Well, they haven't got any choice because they've already redone the car with all the radiators and everything. And B, you still need a good car around Monaco.
Yeah.
Do you not?
I think there's 4 teams in it. If we take Monaco to be, let's face it, all about Saturday these days. Yes, I know things can happen in the race, and maybe we'll get some rain. Maybe we'll get something clever strategically, like we've seen before, but we've also seen strategic failures. I think potentially there's 4 teams in it on a Saturday around those streets, because I think Mercedes has struggled in a straight line, but they're okay. They seem to be okay in the slower speed corners. And this is obviously a high downforce track. I think Ferrari's issues not been about rotation, it's been about rear instability in the high-speed corners. Aston Martin know they're strong in low and medium-speed corners, and again, not in a straight line. And the RB19 is the RB19. It's going to be strong. So I think that we could be, and maybe we'll get a little bit of weather to throw things into it. I think we could have 4 teams in it on
that's
the
an
Saturday.
exciting prospect, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean,
But back to your point, though, I'm not entirely sure that in the grand scheme of things, the grand scheme of the season, that missing out on Imola is really going to... Yes, there might be a threat from Fernando Alonso in Monaco, but in the grand scheme of the season, is it that much of a concern for Red Bull? Do you think they're really worried about the fact that Imola didn't go forward?
It depends on whether you believe Christian Horner's.
Yes.
We must get the points in early before everyone catches
Do
up
you
with
believe
us.
it?
Rubbish.
Do you believe it?
Well, he's got a point in that there are going to be, at some point, the aerodynamic testing restrictions post-cost cap breach is going to hurt them. It has to. We just don't know when that will be. My instinct is that will probably be more or less at the end of the season when everybody's given up and thought about next year. And then you'll have a slew, once Red Bull are close to wrapping up both championships, you'll have a slew of them getting beaten and them saying, look, it is hurting us. But they've already wrapped up both championships because everyone's concentrating on next year. I don't know.
Maybe. I mean, for me, for Aston Martin, who got 100% of the wind tunnel and CFD time compared to 63% for Red Bull when you've applied their penalty to the 70% of that. So maybe you could, contra that with the fact that it's they need to get their points in early because they've got an advantage when it gets reset. Is it June?
July, yeah.
In June, July, it gets reset on where the championship standings are. Aston Martin are currently second, aren't they? So it depends on the lag time, doesn't it? But I don't think it's going to bother Red Bull with that car that they've missed a race. In fact, actually, when you look at the sprints to come and the toll on the engines with the extra engine now that's been brought in too, they've lost the race for that, haven't they? So maybe it benefits everybody in that there's not going to be the mileage on the engine.
Let's move it on and talk about this story then that broke this week. Reported in the Mail here in the UK that Ferrari is set to offer Lewis Hamilton the chance to win his 8th title at Ferrari. It's understood to be in the region of £40 million a year. Come on then, let's get into it. Simon, what did you think? You heard, you saw the story.
Yeah, I got called out, didn't I, on the podcast a few weeks ago because I said I wouldn't rule out, Lewis Hamilton moving to Ferrari. However, having looked at the first 5 races of this season, I just think, why would you bother moving at the moment? It's not like anybody else, apart from Aston Martin, have made the gains. Christian Horner, he even said to us, didn't he, post-race in Miami, he said, where are the others? Where are the others? So I understand the lure of Ferrari, but when you look at them, for the last 15 years, and this might sound harsh, but they have been serial underachievers. You know, they've been a team in constant transition, whereas Mercedes have the pedigree. They made one philosophical mistake, and now they're in transition. And maybe that transition period will take last year, this year, and they know they're already a year behind if these upgrades get them to the point where they're then on a philosophy or a track that can get them, or they can play development war with Red Bull from the start of next season. But it's almost Hobson's choice, I think, for Lewis. Why not stay with a team that brought you all that success rather than risk it just to say I was a Ferrari driver for one point of your career, when really they've got a quick car on a Saturday, but they don't on a Sunday. So I don't think there's any justification. However, what I will say is, how about this? 2024, that's when Checo's contract runs out, end of 2024. Yeah. Okay. If you're Lewis Hamilton and you want to win an 8th world title, there's only one team you want to be at until 2026, and that is Red Bull.
But surely that would be like seeing pigs fly.
But of course, but if I'm not saying this is going to happen, but I dare you, Christian Horner. I dare you, for the sake of everything that's gone before, and 40 million, 50 million, whatever, if Max is like, well, you know, I don't know if I want to stay in the sport. Lewis is getting near to retirement. We get to 2025. It's the last year of the regulations. Why don't we have a 1-year shootout?
Well, yes.
It's not going to happen, by the way. No. Just so clickbait. It's not going to happen, but it's fantasy stuff, right?
Yeah.
I must have been away from school that day that they taught us about what Hobson's choice means, because I genuinely don't know.
Does it mean what that means?
Isn't it Sophie's choice?
No, that was a film.
Meryl Streep.
What was the other choice? There are different choices.
Firstly, I think 40 million offer to Lewis Hamilton is a bit of a lowball offer for Lewis Hamilton. I think it's probably about 5 million less than he's on at the moment.
But he doesn't care
maybe
about
even 10 million less than, but it's a measure of your value, isn't it?
Yeah.
So they keep telling me. Is something that Mercedes are actually going to offer him as part of it, you know, not only the remainder of his driving career, but also a longer-term association with the Mercedes brand that is valuable to Lewis, number one. I think it's... Number two, I think Ferrari are offering everybody a job for anything at the moment. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if their replacement for Lauren McKees, you know, they announced David Croft as their replacement as sort of sporting director.
That would be a good choice.
I mean, well, you don't have to apply. Ferrari are offering.
No headhunt.
I said this in Miami when I approached that Red Bull the guy. Where, you know, they are offering everybody a job in Formula One. Everyone is on Ferrari's shopping list because Frederic Vasseur says, I am going to put together a crack team of amazing people around Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc to make them realise, oh, wow, you know, this is incredible. Adrian Newey, they offered him a job, didn't they, with big money?
Christian Horner, maybe they were talking
Christian Horner, they are offering, it shouldn't be a surprise or a story that Ferrari are offering somebody a job. Daniel Ricciardo. They'll offer anybody a job. They are after the best and the biggest in Formula One at the moment as they seek to rebuild. So it shouldn't be a surprise that they offered Lewis Hamilton everything. I think 40 million. I don't know where that's come from. They should be. If it was 80 million that John Elkann had said, "I will pay you 80 million," then that would get people's attention.
Yeah.
But anyway, I don't think he's likely to go. Maybe if he wins the elusive 8th at Mercedes once they get the car right eventually. If he wins the 8th, then potentially he might go. Let's see if I can win another one for Ferrari. But he might be into his 40s by then. So, and what about Charles Leclerc? I mean, what are they going to do? Replace Charles Leclerc? Is Charles Leclerc going to swap with Mercedes?
Yeah. It's either a swap deal, isn't it, for Leclerc, or it's going to be Hamilton and Leclerc dream team is what they're after. I do think, and I'll come to you on this, Naomi. I think a lot of Lewis's decision about his future depends on this upgrade set.
Yeah.
You think it hinges?
I do. I think that when you look back to what happened last year, the hopes for the W13 coming out of the simulator were that it was going to blow the rest of them away. It was going to blow Red Bull away. It was going to blow Ferrari away. And then the correlation between what happened there and reality, well, we all know the story. You know, Red Bull went with the undercut side pod philosophy, which everybody's moved towards, whereas Mercedes had this exposed floor, and then obviously the porpoising happened. They had to stiffen the floor. They couldn't raise the rear ride height enough, so it turned into bouncing. And then all of these years' problems have come from the fact that I think they were just tantalised by those figures that just said, we're going to completely and utterly destroy the field. Let's stick with it. And then they get into this year and all of the limitations that were created by having to try to solve those problems, including, keeping Lewis further up front in terms of his seating position so he doesn't fill the rear of the car. They just had to have a reset, didn't they? They were literally changing horse midstream. That's what they've needed to do. They had to have a complete rethink of the philosophy. If they've got it wrong this time, what happens with the no blame culture then?
Well, I mean, I think when you talk about this Ferrari opportunity, I guess this whole conversation we're having right now would have been so different had Imola happened, because we would have more of an indication on, how much potential is now in that car, how it's going to potentially evolve going forward. I personally am quite excited by the prospect of Lewis considering Ferrari. I don't think it will happen, but I think, every young driver grows up wanting to be a part of the Ferrari team because it has such an incredible legacy. So just thinking about Lewis in a red suit is like something, he's obviously been at the same team for so long, and I think change is always exciting. So on one hand, I'm like, it sounds quite exciting, but to your point, why would you do that now? I mean, their two drivers are behind, collectively they're further back in the championship at Ferrari than they are at Mercedes.
So go to Red Bull.
Well,
more exciting for everyone, wouldn't it? If he went to Red Bull?
I guess the question is though, when Lewis is looking at Ferrari, is he seeing a better team than Mercedes that's going to give him the 8th world title?
That's why I think that at this point he's probably not considering it at all. I think he's also been very vocal about the fact that he wants to also leave his legacy with Mercedes, much like Nicky did. So I think that's also potentially a reason why he might end his Formula One days with Mercedes as a driver.
Yeah.
And as you say, there's potentially an opportunity for him to be a part of the team, not as a driver going forward as well. So I don't think he's considering it. But as you say, if these upgrades don't live up to what they're hoping that they will, and potentially let's talk about next season, if they start the season poorly again, then I think he will be considering in what manner he wants to end his career in Formula One. Does he want to be struggling for 4th or 5th place, or does he want to be back at the front? And then I guess, Red Bull.
It's not going to happen, everybody. It's not going to happen.
I mean, I'll speak up for Ferrari. I think, if they do get the right people in the team, and with new sporting director David Croft in there, and they're going to. By the way, that is also not going to happen. It's just a joke. Then they can build themselves into a new group of, race winners and championship winners. They can do. But
But so can Mercedes.
That's true, and maybe slightly quicker. Although, I will say, I've got an annoyingly good memory for lines that come out in our programme. Do you remember when I joined you two in Bahrain, when Toto Wolff had his slightly sort of surprising outburst about how this is a worst day in his race?
Yeah.
It was
after qualifying.
I think he came out with more after the race.
No,
when I said,
I
said, why don't you wait for the Imola upgrade? And he said, I'm not interested in the 4/10 or 6/10, he said. I said, the 6/10. He said, he put a time number on this upgrade that we're about to see this weekend. And my memory is good that he actually said it, but crucially falls down when I can't actually remember what the time was. Was it 2/10 or 6/10?
I
think it was 6/10.
I think it was a chunk, wasn't it? But it was
6/10.
over. It was after qualifying.
Yeah,
I'm sure it was. When he came in and he just said,
Okay.
that's we're not going to.
Because I come and join you in your little presentation.
Okay, well maybe
crescent.
Your head is bigger than mine,
and
so
it can keep all this. I think Toto said, let's go back and check the tape. I think he said we can't rely on the 6/10 that Imola upgrade will give us. We need a second, and we need a second or more to catch Red Bull. So let's not forget that when we get to Monaco, and all right, maybe Monaco won't show exactly what the full potential of what it was. But if that Imola upgrade is only half a second per lap, they will what? That will put them into your qualifying fight for pole, won't it? That would put them in there.
Yeah.
But in the races, it won't, when they're finishing 55 seconds behind, will it?
No. They need a
They need a
that's
second,
the problem, isn't it?
Yeah.
They need a second.
Which
that's
is what the change of concept
That's the whole point of the change of philosophy.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about the other bits of sort of disquiet, if you will, coming out of Mercedes and Lewis? He obviously called the team out as well, didn't he? He said they hadn't listened to him over the design of the W14. Are we seeing like a slight change in Lewis with perhaps the way he's interacting with the team? That maybe he's a little bit unhappier than he has been. Obviously, when he was winning the world titles, he was very happy. But the last few years, as it's not been going to plan, we are hearing different noises, aren't we, coming out of Mercedes?
Yeah, I guess that's only normal. As you say, he spent such a long time being very successful in Formula One with a car that could help him to, generate those victories. And now he's got a car that isn't really, worthy of the fight. But I think, especially after everything that happened, Abu Dhabi 2021, you come back in it, you want to set the record straight. You don't have the weapon to do that. And then that continues for a second year after that. So I guess you do start to run out of patience. And I think that's a little bit of what we're seeing. I don't know if running out of patience is particularly the right way to put it, but you can see why there's frustration, and you can see why they need to start being a little bit harsher with their words and potentially being more opinionated about the changes that they want in order to generate that change. We saw the same thing at Ferrari, that they were kind of like, oh yes, things are okay, things are fine. No, things are not fine. You need to just confront these things for what they are, say the way you feel, and hopefully that will then spike that change. And since then, we have seen change. We've seen the change with Mike Elliott and James Allison, and hopefully, that will be the things that make the difference for them. But I think it's only normal to be seeing reactions like that from Lewis. It's not the position that you want to be in, particularly at this stage in your career.
How would you describe his character at the moment, Ted? You've obviously known him and seen him and interviewed him in the paddock for his whole career. So where would you kind of say he's at the moment?
He's in the lion couchant. Is there a couchant and rampant? The lion. He's in the
couchant.
The couchant is when you're sort of resting. He's in the resting lion.
Okay.
He's having his 2 years.
Yeah.
He's having his 2 years before he's the rampant lion again, going for the championship. I believe that's how I see him, and I think he's happy with that. I think, did you say in Miami that that Abu Dhabi 21 took? Oh, it was Brundle, wasn't it? Martin said, I think he came out of line, took it more out of him than maybe we realised, which is completely understandable. I think he's in his sort of rest and recovery phase, charging, maybe subconsciously, he doesn't even realise it.
Yeah.
I imagine he probably does, but he's recharging his mental batteries for next year's car, and I think what you're saying with why is he putting these things out, you're right in that actually he's putting them out also for a reason, and he wants to make it absolutely clear to James Allison and Mike Elliott and everybody else who's designing next year's car, can you just, these are my order of priorities, I think.
Yeah.
I'd like to be moved a bit further back in the car. I know it doesn't affect George the same as affect me, but it does affect me. And if you put me further back in the car where I want to be, where I've got the connection with the rear axle, I'll feel better and go faster. And then you can do all the things that make the car go fast. But he's saying it because he wants to make absolutely clear that that's kind of his number one priority. And I've been into the press and said it. So that's why he's saying it.
And I'm not entirely sure it's a change of character, really. It's just a change of situation. When everything's going well, you don't need to huff and puff about things that aren't going right? So I think we're just seeing the situation around him has evolved. That's potentially also why the team is changing. The immediate people around him are slightly changing. Things have changed, and the situation is very different to what it was previously. I think in general, he's extremely patient. I mean, if you hear his radio messages and all of that, he never really cracks under the pressure or when things aren't going well. So I think the way that he's come about it is still, words are words. Simon might say something like Red Bull should hire Lewis, and those words become much bigger words.
Yeah, exactly.
So the version of what we're hearing is
Big
potentially
headlines.
not whatever was happened or what was said, but I think it's still normal in this situation for him to be making, shall we quote unquote them, demands, or at least make his priorities known.
I've got a text from Daniel Ricciardo for you, for Simon, saying, "What are you on my phone here?
What are you talking
He said, what are you
On your
talking
busy
about? What are you
phone.
talking about? When Checo goes, that's my seat."
Exactly. All I will say about it, I fully expect Lewis I think he's going to stay at Mercedes for as long as the team keeps doing what he feels is enough to challenge. Because I think there is a loyalty there, and I think there's an underlying
his family,
respect for Toto and for everything he's trying to do. But I think it's a team in transition. It's a little bit like, what Klopp's been trying to do with Liverpool this year. It's about reshuffling the pack, bringing in a few new people, and making sure that you've got the team around you to go into battle. I think getting James Allison back into the trenches was a good decision, because he seems to be, character-wise, and even he said it, Mike Elliott, he's an ideas man. He's one for the future of Mercedes and concepts and everything, whereas I think James is one who just likes to roll up his sleeves, get in there, and even if he can make a small difference on a weekend, it matters to him, a tenth here, a tenth there on setup and whatever they can do. So I think that was a smart decision, and let's see if that pays off going forward.
Can we entertain some of the driver pairings that might happen as a result of this? So Anthony on Twitter says Lewis and Charles would be one of the best driver lineups of all time. Do we agree?
Yes, with respect to Carlos Sainz, but yes, agree.
Yeah.
Not as good as Hamilton Verstappen.
Yeah.
I'm just doing it to wind you up, but I mean, look.
Oh, it's true.
To wind who up?
Well, I don't know. Anyone else?
Listen, the good of the sport.
I think
It'd be a great
Lewis and
idea.
Charles together. Could we see a swap? Could we see Charles going to Mercedes and Lewis coming
Possibly.
to Ferrari? So it would be Hamilton and Sainz together, and George and Charles.
Yeah, I mean, the Mercedes need an insurance policy if Lewis decides to either stop or leave. And at the moment, that policy looks like Charles Leclerc.
Yeah.
Until they wait for their juniors, Kimi Antonelli, looks like is going to be
looks good.
champion of the future, is a Mercedes junior. So keep going. I like this Anthony on Twitter. What else does he say?
Well, I'll tell you what, Matt on Instagram actually had a very interesting point, because
You.
it was not me, not replying to my own tweet. Why would Ferrari replace a younger and a very talented prospect for someone with a mere 2 seasons potentially left? He has a legacy at Mercedes. Why would he tarnish it in red? If you're thinking about the future, you're trying to future-proof Ferrari. Why would you go for kind of a short hit of Lewis? Why would you? Charles is the future. Charles has got many, many years ahead of him, hasn't he? So why would you change?
I don't see that being the case, though. I personally don't see that being the case. Do you guys think that they would switch Charles for Lewis? I don't. I think, if anything...
Fred Vasseur's got a
anything's
fantastic relationship, hasn't he, with Charles?
Yeah.
Anyway,
Strange.
and
Exactly.
what he's saying is that you need to build a team around one driver, and the intimation was that is Charles going forward. Therefore, everything that we're talking about is just utter claptrap. And none of this may happen. We are just at the
We're
end.
But I
Hypothesizing.
tend to believe that it would be more likely to be that dream lineup, as, what is his name? Anthony put it,
yeah.
of Charles and Lewis,
Yeah.
rather than Lewis and
Yeah.
Carlos
Yeah.
staying at Ferrari. If
Yeah.
theoretically, hypothetically, this ever were to happen.
And let's not forget about George Russell, who beat Lewis on points last year. What the stats this year? Is he ahead of him on points?
No,
Yeah.
he's behind him.
4-1 in
Behind him?
qualifying,
4-1 in
3-2 in the
qualifying,
race,
race.
but I think 16 behind on points.
But, George...
Well done, Simon.
George...
He's got the numbers all right.
But he had the DNF, didn't he? He had
Yeah,
the
in
engine
Australia.
DNF
Yeah.
in Australia.
Yeah.
So let's not forget George in terms of a Mercedes number one if Lewis leaves. And how would that work with a Leclerc coming in if George is...
I think 2026 is the main factor here for what's going to affect everything. Because if what we hear is to be believed, Audi are obviously coming in. Maybe Honda are going to partner up with Aston Martin. And all of a sudden, you've got 6 engine manufacturers within the sport. You've got 6 works teams then. And then you've got 6 top-level drivers, if you think it's 1-2 basis, to head up those teams. There are rumours that Carlos Sainz might go and head up
To Audi.
Yeah, Audi, or as Sauber turning into Audi in 2026. So I think there's different levels, aren't there, of drivers in the sport. I think personally there's 4 or 5 or 6 that right now could lead those teams, and I'm including all 3 Brits in those. I think that they are all number 1 drivers. They just need, they need the opportunity to potentially be in a works team. Someone like Lando, for example. McLaren must be making a push to get their own engine manufacturer. I just, going forward, I see that as to have a chance to win a championship. You've kind of got to be a works team driver, haven't you?
Can I be controversial potentially?
Yes.
In the
Yes.
silly season debacle that
Yeah,
we have
yeah.
started ourselves.
Yeah.
Lando Norris to Red Bull?
I mean, it's been mooted
spoken.
before, hasn't
Yeah,
it? I possibly. I think him and Max get on pretty well, don't they?
Actually see that.
Not
being
that
a
that
thing.
matters. Yeah, maybe.
For
But it
now,
does.
anyway.
Matters to Red Bull if they get on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But will they get on when they're racing against each other with the same car?
I mean, Zach Brown says that he's got the best driver. I know Zach Brown would say
Yeah.
this, but he's got the best driver lineup in Formula One potentially, which is for the future Piastri and then for the current Lando. But there's all sorts of good driver pairings up and down there. Silly season, May the
Yeah, I mean,
20th.
God, it gets earlier every
23rd.
May
year.
the 23rd.
23rd.
Welcome everybody.
One point I
He's to
wanted
blame. He did it.
One point I wanted to raise on Lewis is what he could bring to Ferrari. Obviously, as a 7-time world champion, he brings a whole wealth of experience of winning world championships. Do you think, possibly, that would be a big reason to bring him in? Would be all that experience, and he could maybe turn Ferrari into a championship winning.
Really still flogging this prancing horse. Isn't
Well, I
he?
mean, you have
thought
to
we
when
were-
you read one article on it, and then the rest of the world's media pick up on it, and then we all get drawn into it. I don't know. There's so many reasons to go to Ferrari, aren't there, for him? And there's so many reasons
Red
for Ferrari to have
trousers.
him.
I mean,
Yeah.
what do you want? What are reasons to go to Ferrari? Red trousers.
I
there you
think
go.
to answer your question, I would say
Isn't
the
it?
answer to that is yes.
Yeah,
Because he's a 7-time
Nice
world
road car.
champion. He's been in the sport for almost 2
Really got to.
decades. And when you compare that to Charles and Carlos, who are still, although they've been here for some time now, compared to Lewis, they're still wet behind the ears. So maybe someone like Lewis would be more likely to take the reins and maybe put a little bit more pressure from the driver's side. So my answer to that would be yes.
yeah.
Well, you could say as well with Charles that if he's got an Achilles heel, we've seen it
Yeah.
recently, and that he can be prone to overdrive it and crash a little bit. He's still supremely quick on a Saturday. We know that. I don't know though. I mean, I think he's in that top tier of drivers, and why would you lose him when he's got so much potential?
He crashes it because the car's not quick enough.
Yeah.
He's still trying to do amazing things with it
Do you think so?
that it can't do. Yeah, of course.
But then why does Carlos not?
Because
push it
Carlos
as
isn't
much?
on pole.
Yeah.
Charles was on pole in
I mean, Charles
Baku.
extracts the limits out of that car.
Baku.
Baku. But even to go to
A
Baku,
fact man.
he was very close to not putting it on pole because he almost put it in the wall in qualifying.
Yeah, because he's out, but he's trying to do amazing things with the car that the car
Yeah,
can't do. And
but he's doing more than the car can do, which is
Yes.
overdriving the car. It's pushing it to his limit. I mean, I respect him
well,
for
you're
that.
the
'cause
driver,
he's-
so yeah, you would.
I respect
know,
him for
yeah.
that because he's really taking that car further than it can go, clearly. that's respectable, but you need to do that within the car's
Yeah.
limits. Otherwise, you don't finish races. And if you think Charles Leclerc is quicker than Carlos, and you look at how many races he's finished behind Carlos, then something doesn't add up. You know, it's good to be fast, but you're there to bag points. So you need to be consistent for that and finish races.
So when you racing drivers say overdriving the car, you mean that pushing it beyond what it can do, rather than just going, oh look, I'm going.
It can be both.
Oh,
It can be both.
Okay.
It can be both. Either you're doing a style that the tires don't necessarily respond to you overheating things. That can also be considered overdriving rather than what the car's limits are capable of doing. But pushing the car too far almost.
When we asked what we think Lewis might do next on Twitter yesterday, someone on Instagram said Sky Sports commentator for next year.
We'd take him.
Would we take him?
I would take him, yeah.
Well, if Ferrari,
There's always that option on the
if
table.
Ferrari employ Crofty, so
Yeah, of course, there is actually a vacancy.
Swap
then
deal.
there will be a vacancy.
That's the swap deal that everyone will be talking about. Yeah.
Okay, on that note,
What other questions have we got?
do you want to do?
We flogged that prancing horse, haven't we?
did. Monaco Preview. I'm going with 33. I'm going with the 33rd win for Fernando Alonso. I'm going to get aboard that
Really?
hype train.
Yeah.
He's just
That would be exciting, wouldn't it?
I just think, I know he's invested a lot into it, but it's a bit of a draggy car, but it's got great tyre performance. Sorry, we're not going to get into tyre chat and all of that. But, and he's such a clever guy who knows how to win around Monaco. I know Max does, I know Lewis does. I don't know, I just think it's the result that he's after, and I think it's kind of result that maybe Formula One needs after
so.
Imola.
Yeah,
I think it
Not
needs
that
it.
that accounts for anything, but
It's all been smiles, hasn't it, between the Red Bull pairing this year, considering how it finished last year. But let's not forget how it started, and it started at Monaco.
In Monaco.
Didn't it? With Perez, little park.
Yeah.
Can we call it that?
well, that's the other reason why Verstappen wants to win,
Yeah.
and why I'm completely wrong on Alonso winning Monaco. Verstappen will want to win Monaco.
Yeah, because of that.
Because of that, because of last year, the disappointment of last year.
And I think that, but as I go back to it, 4 teams in it, all about Saturday. I love qualifying Saturdays, one of my favourite days of the year, because you know that everything's geared towards it, and whoever comes out on top has got, I don't know what the percentage chance is. Someone will know out there, 80% chance of winning the race. So tune in on Saturday.
What's it like to cover Monaco? I still haven't been.
Haven't you?
No, still haven't been.
Are you going?
No, I'm not going this year either.
Gosh.
All 3 of you are going. What's it like to cover? It's
Great.
But yeah, it's
It's
great.
my first one.
Is
It's
it?
fantastic.
My first
Right.
one. Never been.
We used to, and I don't want to get into first world problems here, but we used to stay up the top of Monaco, and then you could walk home at the end of an evening.
No,
but you
we never-
cannot get taxis out of Monaco into France, and where we staying, Cap Ferrat.
Yeah.
Beaulieu-sur-Mer.
Yeah, okay, which is beautiful.
It's great. It's great to cover. I mean, I'm old enough to remember the narrow pit lane before they extended it, and that was great because that was just a sort of personal, physical challenge to escape the practice session without some broken toes or or some legs. That was great. And I used to, my spot in the race was about half an inch next to a pine tree and the other one next to a stack of tyres. And there was just about space for my gargantuan head in between that spot.
Got
to
it in
see.
through that?
I know, I got it in through that,
well done.
with about an inch either side.
Yeah.
With me aerial coming out. So, it's great. It's a challenge. There are 2 paddocks, but the water is there.
The grid. The grid. If you
is
get onto the
great.
grid.
It's fantastic. You're so close to the cars.
So close, yeah. And it's all under
just
the
great.
lovely.
And then you can walk the
pines.
track afterwards and go out and everybody is there. Everybody is there. My first year, I was walking the track, 97, and I saw Norbert Haug, the mustachioed, all good times head of Mercedes-Benz Motorsport with his great tash, having a pint outside the tip-top bar in his West McLaren Mercedes grey jacket. and just relaxing. And I thought, you know what? That's Monaco. You can go for a little thing. And outside the tip-top bar, so beloved of Sir Sterling Moss and everybody back in the day, isn't it? And you know, you see Norbert Haug having a pint out there.
I'm surprised so many people actually stack it at Rascasse, bearing in mind the extra grip created by all the beer spilt on the Friday and Saturday nights on the track, because that's, you can go out and you can have all the crowds can come down and they can do that after the programmes of the racing have finished. It's a special place. And when I think, I was having this discussion actually as I was playing a round of golf the other day about the greatest sporting backdrops. And I don't think there's much ahead of it. I mean, you could say Augusta is a backdrop for golf, because we're talking about, you could say Lords for cricket, you could say whatever. But when you stood there on one of the pontoons going, hello, welcome to the Monaco weekend, and you've got the mountains in the background, the whole of the Principality laid out, and then you hear it's not quite the V8s when we first started, but when you hear these cars going around that track and you see them go through that swimming pool section, I think that's one of the best sections to watch as a spectator on any track, because of the proximity to the walls and the bravery, the guts you've got to have to go through that. It's a fantastic section, and you can see why so many people pay so much money to go and watch Formula One there, because it's all about that. It's just unbelievable. But
you did a piece, didn't you, a few years ago, where you were able to just sit on the hill.
How to do it? How to do Monaco on the cheap
for €20?
Yeah. No, I think my How to do Monaco on the cheap weekend finished up at under £300, and Natalie did one How to do one the most expensive, and hers was about £400,000.
Wow.
Yeah, but it is possible to do it. But
goodness.
I'd love to know. Actually, I can't believe it's your first time. Can you promise me you'll get a ride in the Clerk of the Course, or you'll take a course car out
to go on the
They're
track?
a bit more because it's the Automobile Club de Monaco. They're a bit more. They'll let people go out. So let's get you out in a course car.
Definitely.
I want you to drive it and tell me.
We won't stick you on the hill though, Gnomes. You don't go up on the hill where Billy with the loudspeaker goes and heckles us as we're coming on air.
Because you think it's a really tricky track, but I'm not sure how tricky a track it is to drive. I'd like you to tell me. Tell me once you drive it.
I will. Let me drive it and I'll tell you.
All right.
From everything I've done on a simulator and all that,
it is tricky.
Not the most fun.
Really?
It's like special because it's narrow, the tunnel, all that, but there's not a lot of room to make moves and do all the fun stuff. So
I can see why they don't do the hot laps there.
Well.
Yeah, slow corners, but that swimming pool section, surely that would be fun to do.
Yeah.
Just hair through that at pace.
Yes, because I imagine
for
you're
qualifying
constantly.
lap, I think yes.
Yeah.
For a race, as we know, no fun.
Yeah. I imagine you're constantly
fun.
just on sort of this early part of the throttle, really, and you're just sort of
feathering the
right,
throttle.
Okay.
Feathering the throttle.
Feathering the throttle.
Well,
Hashtag feathering the throttle. Take that, Anthony.
We look forward to hearing your thoughts on Monaco this weekend.
I'm looking forward to it.
All three of you are going.
Sorry you can't come, Matt.
I know, spare a thought for me as I'm here at Sky.
Petition to get Matt to the Monaco Grand Prix.
Okay.
Bring you back a bag of M&Ms.
Thank you.
From the airport.
Yeah. Not even from Monaco. Just
Not even from Monaco, from the airport. Yeah. One of those ones in the plastic M&M.
Can't wait. Well, I look forward to seeing you guys on the coverage. Safe travels. And we'll be back next Tuesday to look back at the Monaco Grand Prix. Hope you can join us then. Bye for now.